Warning: this video contains material of a sensitive nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
On July 2nd, 1951, at about 8 a.m. in St. Petersburg, Florida, a landlady reaches for a doorknob and recoils. It's scorching hot. She asked for the help of a couple of painters who were working nearby. Inside, the scene defies the laws of physics. Mary Reeser is gone. In her place, a pile of ash, a blackened chair, and, most disturbingly, a single perfectly intact foot still wearing its slipper. The room wasn't gutted, and the nearby newspaper didn't even catch fire. All that remained of her was her left foot wearing a black satin slipper, a charred liver fused to a vertebrae, and a shrunken skull. Investigators were baffled. There weren't any candles and no wiring issues, just a human body that seemingly turned into a furnace from the inside out. They called it spontaneous human combustion. Is it a terrifying biological glitch, or is there a darker, more logical explanation? The FBI ruled the case as due to the wick effect. This wasn't a 1950s fad. Stories of human fireballs go back centuries, and it's a worldwide event. In 1400s Milan, a knight named Polonus Vorstius reportedly burst into flames after a night of heavy drinking. In 1744, Grace Pett's family found her reduced to ash while her housemates slept in the same house, totally unaware of the fire. And in 1663, medical expert Thomas Bartholin described how a woman in Paris, France, went up in ashes and smoke while she was asleep. Her straw mattress was untouched. By the 1800s, the fear was so visceral that Charles Dickens, the master of realism, used it to kill off a character in Bleak House. People weren't just entertained, they were terrified. At that time, divine justice for alcoholics was the popular theory. A French priest once noted an 80-year-old woman burned to a skeleton while sipping brandy. His chilling conclusion? The chair, which had not sinned, did not burn. Modern science has a name for this: the wick effect. The theory suggests that under the right conditions, a person's clothing acts like a candle wick and their body fat acts as the wax. A small spark, like a cigarette, starts a slow, localized burn that can reach temperatures hot enough to cremate bone without spreading to the rest of the room. Cases like 65-year-old Danny Van Zant in 2013 or Matilda Rooney in 1885 seem to fit this. A heart attack, a fallen cigarette, and hours of slow smoldering. Case closed? Not quite. Because some victims were still alive. Then there's Frank Baker, a Vietnam veteran who claims he started erupting in flames while sitting on his couch in 1985, and he had a witness and lived to tell the tale. No cigarettes, no stoves, no source of ignition. Just a sudden, inexplicable blaze. Professor James Hamilton of the University of Nashville experienced something he would struggle to explain for the rest of his life. Without warning, he felt a sharp pain in his left leg, like the sting of a hornet, followed immediately by an intense sensation of heat. Instinctively, he looked down. What he saw was impossible. A small, bright flame, only a few inches long, no wider than a dime, was issuing directly from his trouser leg, not spreading across the fabric, but projecting outward like a steady gas flame. For a moment he simply stared. Then he reacted, striking at it with his hand, trying to smother it. The flame resisted at first, flickering but not disappearing. Finally, thinking quickly, he cupped his hands tightly around it, cutting off its oxygen, and just like that, it went out, leaving behind more questions than answers. Enter Billy Thomas Peterson, Pontiac, Michigan, 1959. Peterson was found in the driver's seat of his car, but the front passenger seat had a smoldering fire. His skin was peeling from intense heat, and a plastic statue on his dashboard had melted. Yet his clothing and the hair on his body, completely unburned. The fire chief was quoted as saying, I would not quarrel with the theory concerning spontaneous human combustion. Mrs. Stout went to bed, apparently fine, but the next morning her burned body crumbled when touched. Her nightdress remained untouched. It's been said she died by the visitation of God. July 29th, 1852, Nairn in the Scottish Highlands. John Anderson was found beside his cart, or rather what remained of him was. He was identified only by the horses and cart nearby, both still in place, eerily undisturbed. A witness claimed Anderson had fallen from the cart while already on fire, and yet the horses hadn't bolted. They hadn't panicked. They simply stood there. The flames were eventually put out with buckets of water within 15 minutes, but by then, the damage had already been done. When a doctor later examined the remains, his conclusion was brief and unsettling. This had been no ordinary combustion. On Christmas Eve, 1885, in Seneca, Illinois, Matilda Rooney burst into flames. She was alone in her kitchen. The fire quickly burned her entire body except her feet. Her husband was found suffocated from the fumes in another room in the house. 2 soldiers on the same day in different locations. On February 19, 1888, in Aberdeen, Scotland, what remained of an aging soldier was found in a barn where much of the body had been reduced to ash, but his face recognizable. Straw bales nearby were untouched. And in Colchester, England, the body of a soldier was discovered in a hayloft, where most of his body was burned, but the surrounding area was untouched. His legs and boots were also undamaged. 18th century surgeon Claude Nicolas Lecat published a memoir on the subject after investigating the mysterious burning of an innkeeper's wife. Later, Baron Eustace von Liebig examined similar cases and concluded that spontaneous human combustion was nothing more than a superstition. Elizabeth Clark spent the night at Trinity Almshouse. She was discovered in the morning covered in burns, which later claimed her life. No one heard anything during the night. The bed itself wasn't burned. April 7th, 1938. 3 separate incidents, 3 different locations, 1 exact moment in time. At 1:14 p.m. in the Irish Sea, a man named John Greeley aboard the SS Ulrich was discovered burned under mysterious circumstances. 1 hour later, by the clock, in Upton by Chester, England, truck driver George Turner's vehicle veered off the road and rolled into a ditch. When he was found inside the cab, his body had been severely burned, yet the truck itself showed little to no damage. And then, at 3:14 p.m. in Nijmegen, Holland, 18-year-old Willem ten Broek was discovered behind the wheel of his Volkswagen. He, too, had been burned while driving, despite the car showing minimal signs of fire. 3 different men, 3 different countries, 3 nearly identical outcomes. And here's where it gets strange. Because of the differences in time zones, these weren't separate moments at all. They all happened at the exact same instant. Even crowded, well-lit places offered no protection. At a dance hall in Chelmsford, England, Phyllis Newcomb was out on the floor among dozens of others, music playing, people laughing, when, without warning, something went terribly wrong. Witnesses said she suddenly erupted into intense blue flames. Not a small flicker, not a spreading fire. A violent, roaring blaze, like a blowtorch. Panic tore through the room. Around 20 people rushed to her aid, desperately trying to smother the flames with coats and whatever they could grab. But the fire resisted them. It clung to her. Eventually, they managed to extinguish it. Phyllis was rushed to the hospital, and for a time, it looked like she might survive. But her burns were severe. Infection set in. And on September 15th, 1938, she died from septic complications. An inquest followed. Officials concluded her dress must have caught fire from a lit match or a dropped cigarette. A tragic but ordinary explanation. But her father wasn't convinced. Determined to understand what had happened, he obtained the same material her dress had been made from and ran his own tests. Again and again, he tried to ignite it with a burning cigarette. It wouldn't catch. On the evening of November 7th, 1964, 51-year-old Helen Conway was staying at her daughter's home in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. The next morning, at 8:42 a.m., her granddaughter brought a book of matches upstairs at Helen's request. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. Minutes later, a neighbor heading out for church noticed something strange, an eerie glow flickering from the upstairs window. Concerned, she went to investigate, but the heat inside the home was overwhelming. Unable to reach the second floor, she called the fire department. Firefighters arrived at 8:48 a.m. and made their way into the smoke-filled room. As one of them searched through the haze, his hand sank into something greasy. It was Helen Conway. What remained of her was almost impossible to comprehend. Her body had been almost entirely consumed, reduced to ash, yet her lower legs from the knees down were still intact. They were badly blistered, but unburned. During examination, 2 of those blisters broke. They were wet, but did not leak, strong evidence that Helen had still been alive as the fire engulfed her. Her left arm had burned down to the bone, a bracelet still hanging eerily from it. And yet, the room itself told a far stranger story. The chair she had been sitting in was heavily damaged, but beyond that, the destruction was strangely selective. A telephone on a nearby table had begun to melt, while a pack of cigarettes sitting right beside it remained untouched. In the adjoining bedroom, the bedsheets were completely unmarked. A television set had partially melted, but a highly flammable doll placed next to it showed almost no damage at all. Helen Conway had been a heavy smoker. Known to be somewhat careless, cigarette burns had already marked furniture throughout the room. Investigators considered the possibility that she had accidentally ignited herself while smoking. Their conclusion pointed to something known as the wick effect, a process where the human body, fueled by its own fat, can burn slowly but intensely, much like a candle. According to this theory, as the chair beneath her weakened and collapsed, the upper portion of her body fell backward, allowing the fire to consume her almost entirely. But there was one detail that made even seasoned investigators pause. The fire that reduced most of Helen Conway's body to ash, burning at temperatures estimated around 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, was believed to have started and ended in just 6 minutes. No accelerants were found, and because of the speed, intensity, and the bizarre pattern of destruction, her death was initially treated as possible foul play, until it wasn't. On December 5, 1966, 92-year-old Dr. John Bentley was found in his home by a meter reader. Well, just the lower part of his leg and slippered foot. The rest of him was reduced to ash. Damage was confined to a small area where there was a hole in his floor. The rest of the house was fine. Apparently, he loved smoking his pipe and frequently carried matches. The coroner suspected he had fallen asleep while smoking in the bathroom and was burned alive after his clothing caught fire. The fire which consumed Dr. Bentley is estimated to have burned at 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, a common element of supposed cases of spontaneous human combustion. In September of 1967, firefighters were called to an abandoned building in the London, England area where something deeply unsettling was still unfolding. Inside, they found the body of Robert Francis Bailey, a homeless man and known alcoholic. But this was no ordinary fire scene. Bailey was lying at the base of a staircase, his body half turned onto his left side, knees drawn upward, as if frozen mid-agony, trying to curl away from an unbearable pain in his abdomen. And then there was the flame. It was still burning. A strange, steady blue flame was emanating directly from his body. One firefighter later described the moment in chilling detail. There was a slit about 4 inches long in Bailey's abdomen, and from that opening the flame poured out like a blowtorch. The firefighter emphasized it wasn't behaving like a normal fire. The flame appeared to be under pressure, jetting outward, striking the wooden floor beneath his body with enough intensity to char it deeply. It looked, he said, as though Bailey was burning from the inside out. There were other disturbing details. Bailey's teeth were embedded into a mahogany stair banister, as if he had clamped down in pain at the moment the fire began. And yet, the destruction around him made even less sense. The only significant fire damage in the entire building was directly beneath his body. Aside from the area around his abdomen, where the fire seemed to originate, his clothing remained largely intact, almost untouched by the flames. Firefighters acted quickly, at first believing there was still a chance he could be alive. But extinguishing the fire proved far more difficult than expected. It took multiple extinguishers to finally put it out. When it was over, investigators were left with more questions than answers. His initial cause of death was listed as asphyxia due to inhalation of fire fumes. But after further review, that ruling was changed. His death was ultimately classified as due to unknown causes. Even Wales has had SHC cases where the body of a 72-year-old was found reduced to ash, leaving only a pair of feet in socks, an ash-covered skull, and an undamaged armchair where the person had sat. Another case in Wales where nothing around the body was burned is Annie Webb. When she was found, only a pair of legs, piece of arm, and skull remained. On the 15th of September 1982 in London area of England, Ms. Saffin was sitting with her father, and to her parents' horror, her upper body suddenly burst into flames. The stove was unlit, there was no smoke and fire damage anywhere else in the room. Not even the wooden chair she sat upon was damaged. Her father and his son-in-law were able to put out the blaze, but tragically, Jean passed away of third-degree burns in the hospital later. Forensics analysts later wondered if an ember from her father's pipe ignited Jeannie's clothing. Hard to say. And at college, in England in 1985, a girl was walking down the stairs with a group of friends, and she suddenly burst into flame. They quickly beat the flames out, but she later died of her injuries. Sounds like a story similar to Phyllis Newcomb's, as she was also near a stairwell when she burst into flames. On March 26, 1986, 58-year-old retired firefighter George Mott was found charred to death in his apartment. All that remained of him was a scattering of ashes, a few splinters of bone, and a fragment of skull. George had serious lung problems and needed an air pump and face mask to help him breathe. Even before his son Kendall Mott went inside his home, he says, "The windows were all brown, and I noticed that the door handle was warm when I grabbed it. It was real dark inside the house, and it smelled like it had been burnt. It's scary to find somebody like that, to walk in and find somebody that you love all burnt like that, with no explanation as to why or what happened. Extremely tragic, indeed." January 1987. At a quiet nursing home in the London area, a resident cat named Peppy was something of a fixture, wandering the halls, comforting patients, living a peaceful, ordinary life. Until one moment shattered that calm. Witnesses later claimed there was a sudden bang, a sharp flash, and then blue flames. Peppy was gone. The incident has since been cited by some as a rare and unsettling example of what's been called spontaneous feline combustion, a strange, almost unbelievable extension of a phenomenon already difficult to explain. On December 27, 1987, in Folkestone, England, Barry Soudain was found in his kitchen, but only a foot with a shoe remained in a pile of ash. There was no serious fire damage elsewhere. On December 22, 2010, 76-year-old Michael Faherty of Galway, Ireland, was found dead on his living room floor. His body showed burn marks, as did the floor, yet nothing else was touched. The coroner pointed to SHC as cause of death. Others say it could have been an ember from his fireplace that landed on his clothing and started the blaze. And more recently, on February 18, 2013, 65-year-old Danny Van Zandt was found burned to death in his home. Spontaneous combustion was suspected as none of his furniture was burned. A medical examiner's report concluded he died from a heart attack before a lit cigarette may have ignited his clothing. Long before that, Michigan's lumber camps stretched across the wilderness, lit by oil lamps and firelight, isolated and cold. Men lived and sometimes died, far from witnesses. When fires happened, they were often recorded simply as accidents. But in places where no one saw the beginning, how certain could anyone be? Some of the strangest accounts came from the sea. Sailors isolated and surrounded by water occasionally reported fires that seemed to begin without cause. In a few historical accounts, individuals were found severely burned, while ships themselves showed limited damage, such as the case with helmsman John Greeley of the SS Ulrich, who was steering toward Liverpool, England. He was found burned to a crisp at the wheel. The deck, compass, and surroundings were all untouched. Strangely, this happened on April 7, 1938. Late July 1938, possibly 1937. Somewhere along the quiet waterways of the Norfolk Broads in England, a woman known only as Mrs. Carpenter was enjoying a peaceful outing on the water. It should have been uneventful, calm, ordinary. Instead, it turned into something inexplicable. Without warning, witnesses reported that Mrs. Carpenter suddenly burst into flames. There was no obvious source, no overturned lantern, no sign of an external fire. Within moments, the situation escalated beyond control. By the time it was over, Mrs. Carpenter had been reduced to a charred corpse, leaving behind a scene as baffling as it was horrifying. Like so many other cases from that era, details are scarce. Even the exact date remains uncertain, but the pattern feels disturbingly familiar. November 1808. Sailor Thomas Williams had a known weakness for rum. One night, after drinking heavily, he fell unconscious. Concerned, a friend sent for a doctor, who arrived after dark to examine him. The room was dimly lit, so the physician brought a candle closer, leaning in to get a better look. And that's when it happened. Without warning, Thomas Williams ignited. Witnesses described a sudden blue flame erupting from his body, violent and unnatural. Panic broke out. Someone grabbed a bucket of water and threw it over him, but instead of extinguishing the fire, it only made the flames surge higher. The situation spiraled so quickly, so intensely, that those present fled the scene, unable to stop what was happening. They returned the next morning. What they found only deepened the mystery. Thomas's torso had been almost completely consumed, yet much of his clothing remained. His shirt, in particular, showed signs of burning, but the destruction didn't match what anyone would expect from a normal fire. To those who witnessed it, there was only one explanation that made sense in their world. They said Thomas Williams had lived a wicked life, and that the devil had come for him. And spontaneous human combustion themes or events ended up in various novels, such as Nautical Tales by Captain Frederick Marryat's Jacob Faithful in 1833, and Herman Melville's Redburn, 1849. On the waters of Lake Michigan and Lake Superior, sailors occasionally reported something even stranger: fires aboard ships with no clear cause. In some accounts, individuals were found burned, while the vessel itself remained largely intact. And spontaneous human combustion themes or events ended up in other writings, such as French author Honoré de Balzac's Le Cousin Ponce in 1847, and in Mark Twain's Life on the Mississippi in 1833. And again, Charles Dickens included it in his 1853 novel, Bleak House. A character dies, consumed by fire from within. Readers were unsettled, not because it was fiction, but because it echoed real reports. Also, comic books featured the fireball theme, such as the 1940 comic called Fireball, where a veteran firefighter is betrayed, left to die inside a raging chemical plant inferno by a villain known only as the Bug. As the flames close in, something unexpected happens. he's drenched in volatile chemicals, an accident that should have killed him, but it doesn't. Instead, it changes him. When he finally emerges from the fire, he's no longer just a man. He can control it, absorb it, become it. Other comic book characters of the same era with similar themes are the Human Torch and the Flame. Cases of so-called spontaneous human combustion haven't faded into history. They're still being reported. And despite centuries of speculation, no single explanation has ever fully accounted for what witnesses describe. Some researchers point to rare natural phenomena, things like ball lightning or unusual buildups of static electricity. Others suggest more conventional causes like the wick effect, where the human body can burn slowly under the right conditions. But not everyone is satisfied with those answers. Some theories go further, into territory that's far less understood, ideas that the human body itself might generate, or even attract, an unknown form of energy. Concepts tied to phenomena like levitation or telekinesis. It sounds far-fetched. And yet in 1976, Soviet parapsychologist Gennady Sergeyev studied a woman reportedly capable of telekinetic feats. He claimed to witness energy being drawn into her body, energy that left burn marks on her skin and, in at least one instance, appeared to ignite her clothing. Whether that account reflects something real, misunderstood, or something else entirely, it raises a question that still hasn't been answered. Because across many of these cases, witnesses describe the same disturbing pattern: a bluish flame, sudden, intense, spreading rapidly over the body, and when water is thrown onto it, it doesn't always put the fire out. Sometimes they say it makes it worse, like a grease fire. Is it psychic suicide? The body literally giving up? Is it a freak reaction to Earth's magnetic flux, or is it simply a rare, tragic convergence of science and bad luck? In 2010, an Irish coroner officially listed SHC as the cause of death for Michael Faherty. The first time in history a government official admitted, "We just don't know." So, is spontaneous human combustion a supernatural phenomenon or a scientific anomaly? Is it 99% true or not? If this mystery kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe to 99% True or Not. And stay tuned for our next video, where we dive into the strange case of Hannah Beswick, the woman so afraid of the grave she refused to be buried. Other future videos will cover Michigan fireballs, where reports of unexplained fireballs have been seen crossing Michigan skies, brilliant and gone in seconds. Most are explained as meteors. But in the context of unexplained fires, they add to the mystery and another video topic in the future. And elsewhere, cases like the Odon fire poltergeist describe repeated unexplained fires in a single location, objects igniting and flames appearing without cause. Investigators search for answers, and one fully satisfied everyone. Maybe spontaneous human combustion isn't something we've proven completely yet, but the stories, the patterns, the fires that don't behave the way they should, those are real. No confirmed cases of spontaneous human combustion have been scientifically verified. This video presents documented cases, historical accounts, and reported phenomena. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps a ton, and I'll make more.